my pleasure to welcome to the show Nick Hanne from the Free Speech Union. Nick, kia ora, thanks for joining us.
Kia ora, thank you, Andrew. It's good to be with you.
Now, something that you and I have talked about beforehand, in particular, the case of Portia Mall. Now, this is one of the big stories that Free Speech Union have been involved with in the last year. And in some ways, you think, oh well, this is a story of victory. A precedent has been made here. A New Zealand journalist who was essentially attacked by people involved with the Chinese Communist Party, people here in New Zealand. A little bit of a setup there. Look, I'm not sure I'm explaining it that well, Nick. Have I got the basics of the story right, though? It started with this one, but it's bigger than this. Actually, it's not just a one and done situation. It's not just Portia's situation. This is happening in quite a few different parts of society at the moment.
Yeah, so some of your audience will have probably, no doubt, followed this story as we've talked about it on previous occasions. And the FSU has been helping Portia, a local East Auckland Kiwi Chinese journalist, and she's been in this country for a couple of decades, covering issues in the Chinese community. And she's often worked with some of the largest, media groups in the country, like Stuff. She's won an award at the Qantas Media Awards for her journalism, her investigative journalism. So, she's somebody who really knows his stuff. And she is, more than anything, somebody that wants to get the truth out. Her work in this space, looking at the kind of influence that the Chinese Communist Party has in this country, has been absolutely vital, we believe, to maintaining and preserving our democracy. It's people like Portia that keep democracy, running.
Yeah.
And the problem is that, as we've talked about before, she was silenced by the Manukau District Court when this antagonist of hers, a guy by the name of Morgan Zhao, who is a known CCP fan, and he's a proxy, we argue, who is trying to advance the CCP's agenda in this country through trying to intimidate people, through trying to shut down those like Portia who are attempting to raise the alarm. And what's really become apparent is we've done more work, not only on Portia's case, but as we've seen the ripple effects of people like Morgan Zhao, who are harassing and intimidating particularly through legal action, but also through online sort of threats, intimidation, that there is a major problem.
Yeah.
This is not an isolated case, and we're beginning to realize. I've begun to realize just how pervasive the problem is. There are large numbers of people in this country, those especially in the Chinese community, who have really felt now that they can't speak out anymore. They can't say what they really believe, especially when it comes to questions like democratic representation and human rights issues.
Yep.
And if they're in any way critical of the CCP, of the People's Republic of China, then they fear that there will be some sort of retaliation. And many of them have family members back in China still. They've got friends over there. They know that the Chinese Communist Party has leverage. Doesn't matter where they've gone in the world. It really is quite alarming now, the network of, I wouldn't say established spies necessarily, but there is a culture abroad now outside of China that is kind of helping to enforce the party line. And so anything that's critical of the regime, anything that's critical of Beijing, comes under that sort of influence, or falls within that net. And this type of action is very difficult to link officially. You can't say, well, this person definitely is a spy or works for the CCP, because it's gone deeper than that. It's actually a cultural movement amongst many of the Chinese diaspora, those who have gone abroad and are now citizens of other countries like New Zealand. So they may not have an official link in that sense, but we do know that this is going on in a more and more aggressive way.
In some ways, it sounds a little bit like a conspiracy theory, and not criticizing
Sure.
your research on this one.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, and maybe this is well, the great PR job that the Chinese government has done. Aren't China our friends now? They're our biggest trading partner. They've kind of embraced some Western values. We don't need to be worried about them anymore. It's not like they were back in the day. These people are part of our community and our friends. That's certainly the way that the government would like this portrayed. And well, honestly, in some cases, it's true, of course.
Sure. And so I've got a few points, I guess, in response to that. Yeah, it absolutely does, if we're not careful, come across as though it's some sort of conspiracy theory. And really what it comes down to is actually there is well-documented evidence now by our own journalists in this country and many other countries like Australia, the UK, and the US, showing that there is often an unofficial campaign or network of sort of campaigners operating in these countries in order to try and promote a more favourable view of China.
Yeah.
Now, that in itself is not a problem. The difficulty is that some of the measures that are being used are designed to intimidate and harass anyone who is critical of the regime. Now, we shouldn't forget that China has been, since around 1950, has been a communist state.
Mm-hmm.
It of course, modernized, liberalized from the 1970s onwards in a very dramatic way. And that has meant that not only have many Chinese been pulled out of poverty, and there's now a huge middle class, but of course, it's benefited many other countries in terms of the trade relationship. The trouble is that we have allowed ourselves potentially to become preoccupied with the economic benefits at the expense of values that our country and other countries like New Zealand hold dear. And that means that we will lose civil liberties like free speech, because again, I don't have a problem with the idea that we have to trade sometimes with countries that we don't share, where we don't share values. That's just part of living in the real world. To some degree, we have to debate that and decide who we trade with and what we're willing to tolerate in that sense. But this has become not an overseas issue. This has become an issue here in New Zealand. If we've got people who have been here who are citizens, who may be of Chinese origin, but cannot express themselves freely without fear of intimidation, without fear of being harassed through lawfare, this constant use of our court system. Portia, for instance, is facing 2 cases of defamation simply for trying to speak out on this issue.
Yeah.
And we'll have to let the courts decide that one. But from what I've seen, these cases are not really legitimate, bona fide sort of, questions of defamation. They're really an attempt to wear people like Portia down.
Yeah.
So it will be relentless, and there are people who are very happy to undertake this work on behalf of the CCP without, of course, any official link. I would also just say we have had some very alarming things happen in our parliament that are well documented, but people seem to have kind of either heard a little bit about and then moved on from, or just haven't heard at all. And that I would highlight one particular case where both National and Labour both had list MPs who were down in Wellington in Parliament on behalf of those 2 parties working in these political roles, right, as MPs.
Yeah.
Raymond Ho and Zhan Jiang. Now, these 2 were dropped in 2020 through some sort of mutual understanding that the National and Labour parties had with each other, because both, it appears, had very significant links to the CCP. Mm-hmm. One in particular, Zhan Yang, who had been my politics professor when I was doing postgrad studies at Auckland, had been pro-Beijing for a very long time. And it turns out, and he, in fact, acknowledged that he had taught at the spy school in Beijing for the CCP. Now, if we have people like that in our parliament, it's nothing to do with their ethnicity.
Yeah.
It's the fact that they're Chinese. It's not that. It's the fact that they have these links to the CCP.
Yeah, I mean, just on that one, because, you guys are the Free Speech Union, free speech for all or for none, that includes communists, that includes people who used to work for the Communist Party. It's not the freedom of speech, it's not the ability for people to put forward different ideas or even ideologies. It's whether or not other people are also afforded that free speech, or whether there's an abuse of power, right?
Yeah, and I think there are obviously questions that are outside of my remit in terms of the free speech union. But what I would point out simply is that we have allowed our society in this way to be compromised by people who have an authoritarian ideology. And yes, they can share it, but they should, if they do so openly, they can. They're entitled to do so in this country.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that it's being used to silence other people. So there's a chilling effect which is going on. And the Chinese community are realizing that actually they don't know that they can rely on people in government to maintain their rights that they have here in New Zealand that they didn't have in China.
Yeah.
Because there's so much fear that they will be dropped, that they won't have anyone to back them up. People like Porsche, unfortunately, have been a case in point.
Yeah.
So we need to be sure that our elected representatives are paying attention to this issue, and they're not just paying attention, but they're doing something really tangible, really solid here that will make a difference, so that our culture of free expression can be maintained.
Hey, appreciate the work that you do. This is such an important issue. Thanks for drawing our attention to it. Nick, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.